Talking about my biggest problem clients. And, as you can imagine, I need to tread very, very carefully here to make sure I don't piss anybody off. Hey, everybody. This is Richard Whalen, owner and broker of the Imagination Brokerage. I am coming to you live from our incredible studio here in beautiful Santa Ana, California. Today we're going to be doing something a little bit different. I don't usually get into talking about my clients in a negative way like this, but I think that what I'm going to do is mix up a whole bunch of the names and details and stuff like that so that hopefully, I don't offend anybody with this one. So while I can guarantee you that all of these situations are things that I have had, I want to, assure you that I'm not going to give away any of the actual, pertinent details, identifying details of any of these stories. So without further ado, let's get into it. First we're going to start with talking about my biggest problem, buyers. I have kind of mostly specialized in buyers over the course of my career. And so, we're going to start with that. Then we're going to talk about sellers. And then ultimately, we're going to talk about how at the end of the day, I don't actually blame any of these people for, the things they said, the things that happened, because ultimately it was my learning process, my kind of becoming better at understanding and anticipating potential problems, trying to set people's expectations correctly along the way that, really makes it so that I don't really have any of these problems anymore. So, whether you are a potential buyer or a potential seller trying to kind of educate yourself on how not to make these mistakes, this is a good video for you. Also, if you are an agent or a broker looking to avoid running into these mistakes yourself, this is a great video for you. Okay, so let's start with buyers. I want to start with just like a quick little story about a woman in Beverly Hills where we were touring a bunch of different houses. And, in one of them, one of the earlier ones, I asked her, okay, all right, what do you think of this one? And she goes, I don't know. I just don't like it. I'm like, okay, all right. Is it, too big, too small? I mean, is it too old? She goes, I don't know. I just don't like it. And, this was earlier on in my career. I unfortunately, I got a little bit annoyed, and I was like, well, I mean, if you don't tell me what's wrong with it, then I can't really help you. And she goes, okay, fine. I'll try. And she kind of takes like a few steps back from me. So imagine I'm sitting right now. Imagine I'm standing. She just goes, I just can't, I just can't. She turns all the way around the circle and goes, I can't turn around in here, And, I looked around. I was like, I have no idea what that means. Is it like it wasn't, like a super crowded, layout or anything like that. It was a pretty standard, it was a little staircase and, like rooms on either side. I mean, I guess looking back, perhaps she was meaning that she wanted something that was like a open floor plan and or maybe more natural light or a better view or less clutter. These are all things that I would today be able to ask more clarifying questions and understand what she was talking about. But at the time, I was just like, oh, you can't go like this in it. Okay. All right. Well, let's go look at the next house and you let me know what you think. And long story short, that interaction did not work out very well. All right. So another thing that I dealt with at one point in my career was, I was talking to a man down in San Diego who specifically wanted a house that was, that he felt like was very secluded and private, but that also was walking distance to shopping and dining. And of course, ended up kind of thinking about the house from up, which is, yeah, it's secluded in a way, but, walking distance to everything. And, but I didn't say that out loud. We looked at a bunch of different houses, and, every time we looked at something that was, by the beach or up in the hills or, something like that. So it was like a little bit more secluded. He didn't like that. He wanted it to be, he just was very adamant. He wanted it to be walking distance to, good restaurants and places to hang out. But then, every time we looked at places that were, down anywhere within even remote walking distance of places, he'd be like, yeah, but it doesn't have a view, the lot size is so small. It doesn't, and ultimately we weren't able to find anything together. Nowadays I understand that, you really have to prepare buyers for having realistic expectations. I think at the time, maybe I felt like, okay, once he sees that what he wants literally doesn't exist, then it'll all work out. But that was a lot of time and work and effort on my part to kind of teach a fairly simple lesson that I probably could have, brought up in our very first phone call. Like, hey, man, those two things are contradictory. And, and I think also at the time I was like annoyed by it, when nowadays I realize that pretty much everyone has, to some extent, unrealistic expectations, but they're just not aware of it. Right? Like, not everyone spends all day, every day looking at houses like I do. And so, it may not come as easily and quickly and intuitively to them that, hey, maybe these two variables are actually contradictory and there's nothing in that, that exists there. Or, in the other kind of end of the spectrum, if something like that did exist, it would be astronomically expensive, or at least outside of their price range. At this point, I've shopped around with people anywhere from, $500,000 to $5 million purchasing budgets. And the one consistent thing is that every buyer I have ever worked with for any type of real estate ever has ended up realizing they needed to adjust their expectations, sort of learn where they're willing to compromise and what their priorities are. And I don't expect anyone to know all of these answers right off the bat. Like, at this point, like, I understand, like, there's a certain sort of like a kind of a carefree lack of knowledge of the industry. I'm not going to say ignorance, but just they haven't had the chance to explore yet. And that's why, that's why they need me. They need me to sit down with them and go over all of their, what they think are all of their kind of priorities and deal breakers at the beginning. And then, in my experience, after a few weeks of looking, those expectations and compromises start to change as they start to realize, oh, actually, you know what? When I saw them side by side in person, I realized that having a backyard is more important to me than being closer to work, or that, being close to shopping and dining is more important to me than having a view. Sometimes people just don't really know that until they go and look at it in person. And so, whether you're an agent who is kind of learning how to guide someone through this, or you are a buyer, out there house hunting, yeah, just realize that from the beginning of the process to the end of the process, you may surprise yourself with the things that you learn about yourself and your own priorities. All right. Let's see. Here we go. Yeah. So another one, and this is actually very, very common. So common that I can't even, there's one particular instance that I'm thinking of here where, I showed a couple through Chino Hills, and, right at the beginning, both of them were like, oh yeah, we're very handy. We were huge fans of HGTV. We want to get our hands dirty. We want to do everything ourselves. They had this really clear idea of wanting to, be that kind of couple that, rolls up their sleeves and buys a fixer upper, saves a bunch of money along the way and all that. And so I'm like, oh, finally, these are my people. My wife and I are very similar to this. And so, I went and I started showing them houses, and even to the extent where, again, this is like such a wheelhouse for me that I'm able to go in. I'm saying, hey, so you see this sort of white tile countertop? I love seeing these in houses, and immediately as soon as I see them in photos, I'm like, yes, let's go look at that one, because those are like being able to change out those countertops and then repaint or refinish the usually the genuine solid wood cabinetry that's there. It just makes an absolutely stunning improvement for the minimum amount of money. It indicates a certain age, a certain vintage of homes built at a certain level that by and large they have good bones and are tremendous fix and flip. So like stuff like that, like I'm showing them all my little tips and tricks for finding things that are going to be really good renovation projects. And one by one, every single one, they shot them all down. They just kept going like, oh yeah, but it just doesn't feel right, or this neighborhood just isn't quite right, or this thing just isn't quite right, or this thing, like just over and over and over again, they just kind of kept hemming and hawing until finally we started looking at brand new fix and flips and, new construction. I was just kind of sprinkling a couple of these in here because I started getting this inclination. I was like, listen, if you want to get all the things that you're telling me that you want, you're not going to find any of those things in a fixer. It's going to have to be a house that was fairly newly renovated within the past 10 years. And so we went and looked at a few of those homes, and sure enough, they fell in love with every single one of them. They were ready to make an offer and move in. And I had hoped that by looking at all of these homes, I was like, hey, listen, like this is just like the house we saw last week, except you spend $20,000 and you'll have everything customized to your liking. Whereas if you buy that house, or sorry, if you buy this house over here, you are going to be spending an extra $100,000 to get all of these features. But ultimately they wanted, the heart wants what it wants, and they decided to they'd rather spend that extra $100,000 on getting a house of their dreams, and then the money left aside that they were going to invest, they were just going to invest in something else, maybe invest in the stock market for a while, and then reach back out to me when they were ready to invest in like a second home or a rental property or something like that. So this honestly, at this point, this happens a lot to me. And so I will intentionally sprinkle in a mix of fixers and recent flips, just so that I can really see the people's reactions in person to kind of better gauge what they want. And also, I've found that it helps teach them some of the things that they really like. And then when I explain this time, I'm like, hey, listen, this only costs $15,000. That only costs $20,000. I find that, kind of doing like a balanced mix of both actually then arms them with the tools they need to be able to make a more informed decision. I do feel like over the last few years, I've been able to guide people towards really excellent financial decisions, because they were eventually able to see through the facade of the recent fix and flips and actually be able to figure out how to, make the most value and equity for themselves possible with very careful and strategic upgrades. Overall lessons here for buyers, how you can avoid making these mistakes. You just need to try to make a tangible list of things that you want in a house, and then be ready, be prepared to potentially change that list around. I have reach out to me if you have this particular question, you're not sure how to structure your thoughts on this. I have like a whole checklist of like, hey, do you want to be close to work or far from work? Do you would you rather be in like this type of school district or that type of school district? Would you rather have something that needs this amount of work or that amount of work or no work or whatever? There's a whole bunch of things. And then I have them also like not just kind of give their preferences, but then also rank them in kind of priority, like if I have to sacrifice my drive time, then, this is kind of the next best priority, or something like that. And then it's also just, again, just realize that, like, you know with everything in life, you don't always get everything that you want, but over time, if you give this process a chance, you will learn what you like. You will find something that works for you. And I promise you, whether it's right away or in a few months or a few years, you will love this decision to buy a house. It is absolutely life-changing. I have never had a client buy a house and ultimately decide that it made them miserable, or that, that buying was a bad decision. I mean, maybe I've just been lucky, but I feel very strongly that buying almost anything is at least financially better than renting almost anything. And, I'll shout that from the rooftops. And the whole reason why I started this brokerage was to help make home buying feel more accessible and more strategically and financially rewarding for all of my peers. Okay, so enough about buyers. Let's talk about sellers. Again, some of these issues are things where, I do have specific stories for them, but, at the end of the day, these are very, very common issues. The most common, I'll just start with the most common, and that is pricing too high. This is especially true of, people who the last time they bought or sold a house was in the 80s or 90s, back when, it was the expectation that you put your house on the market at a price higher than what you want, in the hopes that, that gives you room to negotiate, right? This is kind of the way this is the way used car salesmen price cars, because they know that, there's a term in sales called the price anchor. If you anchor high, that, it will give you the opportunity to be able to negotiate afterwards. The only problem is that for approximately like young Gen X and younger, like pretty much everyone in their like younger than their 40s, we've all been sort of trained up in a housing market where the opposite strategy is more optimal. And there's like a whole lot of reasons for this. There's just the way the algorithms work. They favor more eyeballs. And if you just have a lower price tag on there, it gets more eyeballs. And then, also because of just social media and because of kind of like how the notification system works on people's phones, you only have a half a second as a seller to catch people's attentions. And if they swipe it away, they're probably not ever going to look at your house again. It's not like back in the day. So one of the things that I hear a lot is, people saying, oh, well, it doesn't matter how long the house sits. I'll let it sit for 6 months or a year. We only need to find just the right person to be able to buy it. All we need is just that one person. So I don't care if it sits. Well, here we are. We see the results of this. Houses sitting on market for longest period in a decade. There's a lot of people that came into this market, the vast majority of whom are baby boomers or older Gen X, who, came in using kind of the old school tactics and getting just viciously punished by it. When those eyeballs go down, when that algorithm deems your house as not being a very good deal, and it starts to downgrade and downgrade and downgrade your visibility, the value of your house tangibly goes down. Okay. It literally, it goes down below the point that it would have been if you had just priced correctly right at the beginning. I've seen it over and over and over and over and over again in at least every Southern California market, most Southern California markets that I know of. The only exceptions being, if you are in like the big multi-million-dollar houses, that, yeah, okay, all right. In that case, sometimes it takes more time to be able to find the right kind of buyer for you. But if you are close to the median in your market, so, look up whatever the median price is in your market. If you feel like your house is fairly close to that, odds are that someone like me that uses the social media tactics I do, who understands the algorithms of Zillow and Redfin and how the MLS works and, et cetera, someone like me Well, let me put it like this. Every listing I've had this year has sold in 8 days or less. You know, the fastest was I sold one in 2 days, and yeah, the slowest was I sold it in 8 days. And frankly, that was mainly just because we wanted to wait an extra, like do an extra open house the following weekend because we knew it was a relatively slower market. And so I was like, you know what, we'll do two open house weekends instead of just one weekend. And yeah, I mean, it worked. It was great. So, you know, this kind of reminds me though of like years ago when I first started out, one of my earlier listings. It was a woman in Oceanside who would not would not drop the price for anything. We got not just one, but actually multiple offers that were all in the same price range, and she just kept waving them off like, I'm not going to take any low ball offers. And I was looking at it, I was just thinking, you know what? I don't think these are low balls. I think this is the market talking to us. Like these are not like professional investors. Like whenever you get an offer from someone who's obviously a house flipper or an investor, like and anytime someone's like, oh, fast close, like we can close in 3 days, all cash, blah blah blah, like that type of person. If you get that kind of offer, that is telegraphing to me, the listing agent, that it is at least 20% lower than what it could be. But when it looks like it's somebody who is just an end consumer who is earnestly trying to find a house for themselves to live in, I look at that and I think, you know what, that is just the market talking to you, trying to tell you how much this house is actually worth. And and then we missed that early window, that first week of offers coming in. The seller just rejected all of them, hoping that she could squeeze, I think it literally was like an extra $20,000 out of the deal. And, before you know it, it just turned out that, like she ultimately wasn't able to sell that house. I mean, like literally within a couple of weeks, just the offers stopped coming in. I offered, I gave a bunch of advice on how we could, maybe do some renovations and do some staging, because it was also unstaged, unrenovated. Maybe we could, go back to market. But by then it was too late, and she ultimately decided to just, get rid of the house in a different way. And, it's just nowadays in my career, I am much more adamant when I see a situation like that it could turn into that. I am just very clear. I say, hey, listen, these are the price expectations. This is what you should do. And, if we have multiple offers in hand and they're all landing in the same price range, it's either sell it at this price or that's it, go home. Thankfully, I haven't, the last few years obviously have been super hot for the market, so I haven't had to have that difficult conversation. But earlier on in my career, it was a very different situation, very different real estate market. And sometimes, you have to have that hard conversation. And those times are kind of coming back again where, prices are going down. Thankfully, again, we haven't had this issue with our clients. But I know that it's coming. We've seen 5 to 10% drops in value in a few different markets, in a lot of different markets. And if anything, I would say that right now is an excellent time to buy. If you have been on the fence about buying, this is such an incredible time. It's a slow time in the market. This is the time to look for some of those sellers that I'm talking about. Find something that's been on the market for more than 2 or 3 months, maybe even as much as 6 months. And, these stragglers are just, they're going to have a really, really hard time finding buyers. And, so this is a phenomenal time to just be sending out a whole bunch of lowball offers. Just basically from the seller's perspective, if they've been sitting there for months with nothing and they were just about to give up hope, and now all of a sudden, here's your offer. And yeah, maybe it's 20 or 30 or $50,000 below, what they were originally asking for. And maybe they don't even say yes right away. Maybe they're like, you know what? No, 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 we can't, we can't accept that. That's too low. Whether it's a few days or a week or a couple more weeks, if no other offers come in, your offer is going to start to look and feel really, really appealing. A massive dollar figure that is burning a hole in their pocket. They're going to give you a call back. They're going to, at least they're going to haggle with you. At least they're going to say, okay, fine. Let's meet halfway. And, that can still turn out to be a phenomenal deal for you. So, yeah, let me know if you've been thinking about house hunting over the last few years, but you've been scared off by the high interest rates or, the high prices. Right now is an amazing, amazing time to be making offers on houses. Okay. So let's see. Oh, okay. All right. So other problem buyers, or sorry, problem sellers, and we get this kind of a few different flavors of this issue where, they're just unwilling to do work on the house. They're unwilling to stage it. They're unwilling to vacate the house. Like all of these things, I kind of lump them all into kind of the same category of, people who are really undercutting the amount of money that they could be getting for their house by tens of thousands of dollars, maybe even hundreds of thousands of dollars, because they are refusing to do the work needed to show the house well and make the best first impression possible. I knew a gentleman in Long Beach who was trying to do all the work himself. Like he wanted to pinch every single penny. He wasn't going to take any help. He, didn't want to pay for any staging work either. And, it really, really substantially, probably took literally $50,000 to $100,000 worth of value off of his house. I knew a family that, for whatever reason, they wouldn't all leave the house during open houses. They would just sort of sit around, and it was like a husband, a wife, both of their parents, and one of their teenage kids were just in the house all the time for private showings, open house showings, everything. And there's a lot of people just sort of hanging around, making it extremely uncomfortable to show the house. That one's a little bit of a cheat for me because that's not technically one of my clients, but I went with my client to go touring that house and encountered that. And I really liked the house. So I actually went and toured it multiple times, but this was, out in Riverside. We toured it a bunch of times, and just every single time it just toured so badly that, I really felt bad for them. There was another situation. This is kind of funny. This is the kind of the last little anecdote I'll share. I was touring some clients, touring with a client in kind of far in the Inland Empire. And we kind of knock on the door because it was supposed to be this like owner showed or something like that. And we the doors opened by, she must have been like a teenager, like late teens, early 20s, obviously a college student. Like she had that vibe of like somebody who was right in the middle of midterms, like hair all messed up, wearing like a big saggy, college sweatshirt and sweatpants. And like literally as soon as we opened, she opened up the door and I was like, "Hey, I'm Richard for the Imagination Brokerage. We're here for a tour." She goes, "Oh, I can't believe my mom scheduled another one of these. Okay, all right, whatever. Come on in." And we go in there, and the house weirdly was like mostly vacant, and she was the only person in the house. Like she had her one little bedroom with like a little bed in the corner. I guess she was maybe staying in the family. I don't know if it was a second home or a rental property or something like that. She was just staying there just for the week. Like during while studying for finals or something or midterms. And and then in the midst of that, I guess her parents made her kind of stay and open the door for realtors trying to show the house. And it was so uncomfortable. Like every time we walked by the door, she would like look and glare at us or roll her eyes. And we just decided not to go into that side of the house at all. And so obviously that left overall a very, very negative opinion. We didn't end up, my client didn't end up buying that one. So, all right. Overall seller lessons here. Just remember, you only have one chance, just one chance to make a positive first impression. And you actually have two first impressions you need to make. The first impression digitally and the first impression in person. So I don't know if you'd call that the second impression, but it's kind of a first impression of a different sort. You want to make sure that, you renovate it as best you can, stage it as best you can. I understand that this is expensive. If you're having some issues, I've got a lot of financing options for you. So if you're watching this and you want to sell and you know that it's going to cost time and money to fix it up, we have a lot of great sources for financing. There's a lot of stuff that I can pay for upfront for you. There's a lot of advice that we can offer on how to be really strategic with that money. And then, have staging basically sort of hide and obscure and cover up all the rest while emphasizing all the best parts. You might be shocked at how quick and easy and inexpensive the whole process can be. And the amount of returns in Southern California dollars is at least $50,000 to $100,000 in benefit from doing all of this. Like there's no other expenditure of money that yields as good of an ROI as putting on those little touches to, renovation and staging. Staging, I get it. It's expensive. It's like $7,500 these days, but it adds $30,000 to $50,000 in value. So I'm extremely passionate, extremely emphatic about this. Put your best foot forward. Do some incredible photos. Do some videos. We're out here. We're getting on average anywhere from 30 to 60,000 views on our house tour videos for the ones that we, fully guide and renovate and stage. And it makes a difference. It makes a huge, huge difference in how that open house feels. And then once we do the open house, my wife and I go in there, we put in like a really nice table, put out this incredible spread of snacks and wine and cheese and chocolates and candies and sodas and, various different types of caffeinated drinks, because we want to make sure that, people have that positive first impression. We want this house to be like a little party that everyone goes to. We stay there later after everybody else is done. Most open houses close at like 4:00. We're there until 6. We do these called twilight open houses, where after everyone else is done touring all the other houses in the neighborhood, they come to our house last and they have this big party and they have a good time. They ask lots of questions. We've been able to, whenever we do that, we get more clients. We are able to get the best value possible for our seller, get multiple offers on these houses, leave with that incredible lasting last impression for their touring day to, really make sure that that ours is the house that, all those people remember after they go home and, decide which houses they want to make an offer on that evening. So, first impression, last impression, everything in between. We really, really, really come in there hot, and we want to sell your house in a week, because we know that is getting the maximum possible value for your house. So, all right, let's kind of wrap this up here. I'm running a little bit long today. Overall, my learning lessons through all of this, at this point in my career, I don't blame any of these people. Okay. I am the one that has spent my career doing this. I've been at this for over 11 years now, right? I look at houses all the time. I think earlier on, I maybe took for granted that other people would sort of see things my way. But now I understand that, most people very understandably don't come into this with the optimal mindset, either because their experience in life had been different in different eras or maybe different geographies. And, the very first thing that needs to happen is, hey, listen, they need to trust and understand my perspective and why I'm giving the advice that I'm giving and why I'm giving the warnings that I'm giving. And if I can sense that they trust me and believe in the process, then we're going to get along great, and I know we can deliver excellent results for them. If we go through a few conversations and we keep not seeing eye to eye, we keep butting heads, at this point, I say no. I just say, hey, listen, no, I'm so sorry. I can't help you. This is true of both buyers and sellers. Sometimes people just have these unrealistic expectations. And I just, after a few conversations at this point, I realize, like, hey, listen, I don't think this is going to work out. I recommend this type of realtor instead, might be a better fit for you. I say the same thing to people who are, this is another kind of like subcategory of problem clients, not really clients, people I don't work with, is the people who go around and are constantly trying to haggle for my commission. They're shopping around trying to find the cheapest possible real estate broker because, they fundamentally distrust and disrespect, me and my profession. And listen, I get it. It's sometimes difficult to understand what real estate agents do, and there are a lot of really bad ones out there. But hopefully those of you that watch my channel on a regular basis can understand that there are good real estate agents and bad real estate agents. There are people who can bring you a lot of value and have a proven track record. And then, there's people that don't, right? And if you would rather save a few $1,000s, not an insignificant amount of money, save a few $1,000s, save 0.5% or save 1% on the commission. Yeah, by all means, shop around. But, it just so happens that for me, for my brokerage, I know my worth. I know my brokerage's worth. We do not haggle on things like that. Yeah. And then finally, I just wanted to emphasize that, I get that a lot of this is expensive. A lot of this is difficult. And, we have so many sources for help to help you guys. We've got, excellent contractors, excellent, handymen and designers, stagers, one of the best photographers in the business, amazing videography. We've got all these tools and assets just waiting here at your disposal. And, we're willing to offer the financing. We're willing to put our money where our mouth is and, really deliver top of the line products for you to make sure that it is affordable and accessible for just about anyone to be able to, prepare the house, prepare their house the right way and get top dollar for it. And, on the flip side, to help our buyer clients understand their tastes, understand their priorities, educate them on the market, so that literally within 1 or 2 days of touring houses with me, you will be able to look at something and be like, oh yeah, that's 25 grand. That's only 10 grand. This house is only worth 950. That house is being priced too high or too low or whatever. Like I want, we have brutal tour schedules for our buyers because we look at 5 to 7 houses in a broad geography to try to teach you as much as possible so that you can make the best decision possible for yourself and for your family. All right. Well, again, this has already gone a little too long. You can tell this subject is one that I'm very passionate about. I titled this video kind of a clickbaity, my biggest problem clients, but really this was never about the clients. It was about me. I needed to learn. I needed to better communicate. I needed to better coach and train and to get to where I am now, to be able to help just about anyone buy or sell, just about any piece of real estate. Again, my name is Richard Whalen, owner and broker of the Imagination Brokerage. I am thrilled to be coming to you live here every Wednesday evening at 5 p.m. Pacific time. If you have any comments or questions, please feel free to stick them down below. I read every single question, every single comment, every direct message on all the different platforms that we are on. We're on every platform. And I want you to know that even if it's just if you're just looking for free advice, I'm happy to give you free advice on wherever you happen to live, whatever you're dealing with. But if you live and work in Southern California and you're looking to buy, sell, or invest in real estate around here, we can help you. So please reach out, send me a message, and we will apply that investor mindset onto your everyday real estate decisions to change your financial life. Again, my name is Richard Whalen, owner and broker of the Imagination Brokerage. Thank you so much for joining me. Find me at imaginationbroker.com.